Venice is a dream. There's no place like it, and you really must see it once in your life. But this beautiful city is facing existential challenges. On this episode of Untold Italy, we talked to journalist Erica Hill about Saving Venice, an important film she and her team made in conjunction with local Venetians on how they are working towards a brighter future for La Serenissima.
Ciao a tutti and benvenuti to Untold Italy, the travel podcast where you go to the towns and villages, mountains and lakes, hills and coastlines of Bella Italia. Each week your host, Katy Clarke, takes you on a journey in search of magical landscapes, history, culture, wine, gelato, and of course, a whole lot of pasta. If you're dreaming of Italy and planning future adventures there, you've come to the right place.
Dreaming of arriving in Italy, strolling into a gelateria and ordering your gelato with confidence? If you've been learning Italian with language apps but still can't string a sentence together, it might be time to try another approach. My friend Michelle from Intrepid Italian offers a practical way to learn travel-ready Italian. Thanks to her unique 80-20 method, Michelle teaches you exactly what you need to know to connect with locals and have more authentic travel experiences. There's no getting bogged down in awkward phrases and unnecessary grammar. As an adult learner herself with Italian heritage, Michelle really knows how to bridge the gap between English and Italian. As Roma from London said, the learning methodology is great. I progressed much faster in the last 4 weeks than I ever did on my own or using other language apps. To find out more and claim your free Italian travel phrase guide, visit untolditaly.com/Italian or visit the link in the show notes. As a bonus, you'll also get an exclusive $20 coupon code to use on any of Michelle's online self-paced courses. So visit untolditaly.com/Italian and accelerate your Italian language journey today. Ciao friends, benvenuti. Welcome back for another episode of Untold Italy, where I get to talk about my favourite city, Venice. This beautiful, magical place is often in the news these days for all the wrong reasons. And so when the team at Max reached out and shared their wonderful film, Saving Venice, with me, I was delighted to invite presenter Erica Hill onto the show. Venice, of course, is a victim of its own beauty. Often the go-to place for examples of over-tourism, it's sometimes hard not to feel fatalistic and despondent about her future. But what Erica and her team have done with this documentary is to provide hope and show Venice as a living, breathing city that has and will adapt to the sea and all manner of challenges and remain a place that welcomes visitors from all corners of the globe to marvel at her beauty and resilience. Benvenuta, Erica. Welcome to the Untold Italy podcast.
Piacere. Piacere? Piacere. Which one is it?
Piacere.
Thanks for having me, Katy.
Oh, it's fantastic to have you here to talk about one of my favourite cities in the entire world and a topic that I'm really passionate about, and that's sustainable travel in Italy. You've had just this amazing experience making this film in Venice, Saving Venice. Could you share with our listeners your story and your background and how you came to be making this film?
Yeah, happily. And thank you again for having me on. I'm so excited to be able to talk about what was really a dream project for the entire team that worked on it at CNN and really a bit of a labor of love. So I'm Erica Hill. I'm an anchor and a correspondent at CNN. And I had pitched this story about a year and a half ago, honestly, after reading an article titled Let Venice Sink. And I thought, that's interesting. I've never been to Venice. Maybe I could pitch that story. And the more I read into it, I started interviewing a bunch of different people as I was doing my research before I could make a proper pitch. And one of them, Fabio Carrera, who is featured in our documentary, said, you know, Erica, it's not Venice that needs saving. It's the Venetians. And that is what really got the wheels turning and brought us to the point where we put together this 1-hour show called Saving Venice, which is, I like to say you come for what you think is the sinking, flooding city that needs to be saved, but you stay for the reality. It's the heart and the soul and the people of this community who need to be saved. And so that's, that was the genesis of this project. And it was such a treat and honestly, such an honor to be able to tell that story with so many of the wonderful local people that we met.
Yeah, I love that story behind the documentary. I think it's really amazing how Venice just captures your imagination. I went there myself first time when I think I was about 20, and wow, I was just awestruck. But that was your first time in Venice, wasn't it? And I guess you'd done a lot of pre-research, as you've just mentioned, but what were your first impressions, even having all that background that you'd read and seen and talked to people about?
Yeah. So that first day I came in on this gorgeous July day, and it was like a postcard. I was pinching myself in the boat from the airport coming into the city. And I had, to your point, I'd done a lot of research and I had watched a number of things and I've gone through all these pictures. So it looks both familiar to you because you've seen the images, but also surreal in that moment because I couldn't believe this was it. And so I really, it's funny, for the first few days, I would look at the team and I'd say, I feel like we're working in a postcard. I mean, it's just amazing. So I was struck at just the raw beauty of it. And I love buildings and I love windows and doors. These are things that I kind of love to focus on when I travel. And so even just looking at, when I say raw beauty too, I think even just as you're in a boat going along slowly in the canals, right? As you look at the edge of the buildings and you see the way that they've been worn by the water and the wake over hundreds of years, and that these beautiful buildings are still standing, right? Or maybe some of them are sort of crumbling or sinking, and you think, oh, it's just so interesting to see the passage of time. And I was also struck by just the history that is there and the way that this city has endured. I mean, Venice is a city of entrepreneurs and, really smart people who, when a challenge arose, they found a way to work with it and work around it. And more often than not, really profit from it and turn it around. And so it also struck me that this is yet another opportunity for this city.
Yeah, absolutely. They are really creative and inspiring people, and they always have been. I mean, the history going back onto the lagoon and the islands and building what they built, I mean, it's just incredible. They definitely have that entrepreneurial spirit. How long were you there filming?
So we were there, we had 2 trips, which was pretty fantastic. So we were there for a little over a week in July, and we happened to be there for Redentore, which is it was magical. It also happened to be on my birthday, so it was pretty much the best birthday ever. It was a great way to turn 48 with my own fireworks show. And then we were back for a little over a week in October. And it was great to see the difference in those moments, not only in the crowds and the amount of people in terms of tourism, but just the weather and how the city looks different in different light and how it feels different when it's sort of cold and dreary and rainy, which added, I think, to the magic.
Absolutely. I was there in January actually, and it was very cold, but it was clear and there was no one there. And it was just delightful to be able to wander, through some of the high magic moments that people go to when they're first there. But, I think like you, I think that you've come to appreciate it's those smaller, off the beaten path, if you want to use a cliche, places that really do capture your heart in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are places that we really fell in love with. Some of the neighborhoods that we were introduced to through, the local Venetians who we were working with. And when we went back in October, we would jokingly call certain areas. We're like, oh, we're back in our neighborhood. But it was nice to be in that area that felt really local. There was our last day of filming in July. We were over in Castello and we were at Esquero and then it was, we're all hot and it'd been a great shoot, but we were ready for lunch and we looked down this street. And I mean, back to the postcard, there were just clotheslines. And on all of the clotheslines, you saw striped shirts from gondoliers. And then there were kids. It was a Sunday. There were kids sort of running up and down the street. And there was a dog. And we went into this little tiny restaurant that seemed like a neighborhood restaurant. And I thought, this is the magic of Venice, but this is really the magic of any city, right? When you can get to the place where the locals are. And it felt like a real gift for us to be able to be there.
Yeah, and it's not that difficult to find those places actually, because obviously everything's walkable there. And, I really encourage people to go for the walk, like get out of Piazza San Marco, as amazing as it is, but go for the walk, go to the gardens. People don't know there's gardens in Venice. That's a surprising thing to me.
Yeah, and they're gorgeous. I mean, there are gorgeous gardens. And there's so many incredible museums that frankly are still on my list because we were working, we didn't get to go to them. But I think you're right. It's not hard to get out of of the city center and sort of your Instagram spots. And before I had gone, someone recommended to me, he said, one of the best things you can do is wander the streets. Forget your map because it's not really going to help you anyway, because there aren't really names for the streets. He said, and you'll wander and you'll find yourself all of a sudden stuck because you're at a canal. So you turn around and go the other way. And he said, I would just recommend to you that you stop and you listen to the traffic. He said, because the traffic is the sound of your feet and it's the sound of the neighborhood. There are no traffic lights. There are no stop signs. There are no car horns. Maybe if you're closer, right, to one of the main canals, you'll hear the horns on the boats. But I thought that was really great advice to just go get lost in those streets and just, the speed, he said, is the flow of you and your feet and whoever else is around you, which was really beautiful.
Wish I was there right now.
Me too.
I think one of the things that you've noticed as well is that it's the rhythm of life and people that are actually living there. And that's what, when you go wandering, that's what you do see. You see the people doing their things, and it never fails to mesmerize me what happens when you see, like the ambulances, the little boat ambulances, the trash boat, the fire boat going around.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the trash. I had actually watched a really interesting story on the trash pickup before I went to Venice. It was from a Canadian program, a Quebecois program. And it was so interesting the way people, they'll lower their trash down from the window and the way it gets picked up, and the beautiful relationship actually between the local sanitation crews and the people in the neighborhood and the older people that they'll help. And it reminded me, I live in a somewhat small town outside of New York City. And it was really lovely because it reminded me too of, we know all the sanitation workers on our street because we see them, a couple of times a week for recycling and trash. And it just reminds you of what a neighborhood and what a community it is there in Venice. And that, to your point, there's trash pickup and there are ambulances and there's a hospital and there are schools. It's a real living, breathing city. The challenge is maintaining that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does strike you as soon as you arrive what those challenges are, because the sheer number of people in a very small space.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the population of Venice itself has dropped, right? So it's right around 50,000, which is a challenge. But you think about all these people coming in for the day. And, I would say pretty much everyone we spoke to, they didn't say get rid of tourists altogether. They recognize that Venice is now an economy that is highly reliant, if not built on, right? Its survival in many ways is tied to tourism. That being said, it's more about, which I know is a focus for you, it's about sustainable tourism. How do you deal with all of those people, for example, on the water taxis when you're trying to get to work or you're trying to get your child to school, or you're trying to get home to pick your kid up or to make dinner, right? The question was, how could they better manage the flow of people and get people also outside of those more touristy areas so they can see and experience Venice, not just the Venice that is like you'll find in Times Square, right? Times Square is not New York City. It's a bunch of, for the most part, sort of random restaurants and cheap souvenirs that don't really say in their being New York. And that's what you would find maybe in San Marco. But if you move just a little bit off the beaten path, which then reduces the number of people there, I mean, the benefit is huge for anybody who's visiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a much richer experience, and it's really hard to explain to people, like for someone who works in tourism as I do, is to spread your time out a little bit more, because you will have those more magical experiences. Now, one of the experiences you had that I've also done, which is absolutely fantastic, is Row Venice.
Yes, it's so fun. I picked it up quicker than I thought I would. But I loved it. I just thought it was such a relaxing, I keep using the word magical, but that's how it felt. It was such a relaxing, magical experience to be rowing through the canals and then just thinking about what a beautiful existence this is, and why Elena, who's figured prominently in our documentary and who's part of Row Venice, who was giving me my lesson, I can understand why for her it's such an escape, because it's just an incredible way to see the city and to experience the city even more than see it.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, it's a group of women that take people on traditional boats that are not, I think everyone thinks of a gondola, don't they? But
yes.
These are actually traditional boats. And they are also a racing crew, which after having, tried it for a few minutes, I was like, these people are pretty impressive.
They are. It is a serious athletic feat. You're right. So we were there for the Festival of Redentore, which also has a big regatta. And it was just gorgeous. So all the boats are different colors out in the water, and everybody is wearing white pants and striped shirts. And you watch this race. I mean, they are going so fast, to your point, in those boats. I was exhausted watching them. And I was so amazed. Elena said she's from a big rowing family in Venice. And she said, for us, rowing, this is like the Olympics for us. If you're a competitive Venetian rower, this is as big as it gets.
Yeah, and I think just preserving those traditions is going to be absolutely critical to saving Venice, because those magical moments, we always use the word magical on this show because
it's hard not to.
It's hard not to, yeah, is some of the most, the things that you will actually remember the most. You're probably not going to remember so much the details of the painting in the Doge's Palace, but you will remember that feeling when you see those boats zipping past you and knowing just how hard it is to row and keep them going in a straight line.
Absolutely. It does give you a real appreciation for how difficult that is. And to your point, it's not the gondola that you may think of, although it looks similar. But I think it also gives you an appreciation for the gondoliers, right? It's wild to watch the boats navigate one another, especially in the narrowest canals. Early in the morning, if you happen to be in some of the back canals behind the hotels, maybe, you'll see the garbage barge, but you'll also see all of the deliveries, packed with sort of UPS packages, if you will. And so to see the way they all navigate one another with the gondolas, with everybody else, it's impressive.
It really is. We had a guide last year, I think, and she was telling us that when she was pregnant the year before and she went into labour, I was in awe of her because, their houses don't have elevators. She had to go get the boat ambulance to get to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to complain anymore about my birth experience.
No, I don't think I would either. I was worried about going into labor on the subway when I was living in New York City, but not worried about navigating the canals. So you're right.
Anyway, amazing. Like, they are just fantastic. And I think what I enjoyed most about the film really were the stories of the people and the residents and what they're trying to do to make a difference, because everything starts with one individual, one group of people doing something, and, momentum will build. And I loved these stories, actually.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I have to say each one of them holds a really special place in my heart now. I'm always so appreciative when someone shares their story with me as a journalist, with our team, that they trust us with their story, that they open up to us, they bring us inside their world. And each of the stories they're thought-provoking, right? Because each one of them is looking at this issue from a different angle. So, for example, Cesare Bonelli, who owns a restaurant called Alcovo that he and his wife Diana, who's actually a Texan, and I'm told speaks perfect not only Italian, but Venetian as well. They've owned their restaurant Alcovo for, I want to say, maybe 38 years, maybe more. He's part of this collective of 12 or 13 bars and restaurants in Venice that they started, Osti in Orto, the host in the garden, on this island in the lagoon that's part of Venice, San Erasmo, that was traditionally where a lot of gardens and farms were. They decided they wanted to have more local produce. And so they banded together, right? So they're bringing in less from the mainland, not because they have an issue with mainland produce, but they wanted it to be as he put it, at zero mileage. And they wanted to employ more people who live in the lagoon. And they wanted to keep some of the businesses local as they could to support the local businesses, which I thought was a really beautiful idea on their part. And it's working really well.
Amazing. And my goodness, I'm sure you did eat at Alcovo, but it's one of my favorite restaurants.
We sure did. It was fantastic.
Yeah, just so delicious. And they're so kind and generous there. And I love Venice so much.
Katie, what time should I meet you?
Yeah. Well, I'm heading over in a few weeks, actually. So the other aspect of it, and I loved how you showcase the artisans, it's particularly the glass blowing, because I think somehow that's become, you get a lot of the travel shows that show, I guess, like you could say, the Instagram Reels highlights of Venice and, all the glamour and the glitz and everything. But I really love seeing these artisans. And the thing about artisans that I love the most is, why is it they are always leading the way? Like, they're always in the front line of, change.
You're right. I mean, maybe it's that, I don't know if it's that creative spirit, but it's such a great point. So when it comes to Murano glass, so also featured in the documentary, Matteo Silveri, who co-founded Rehab. So I didn't realize until I first met him that I believe it's half of all the glass that's made, or half of what is used, if you will, ends up on the floor and it's waste. And you can't reuse that glass waste because of the way that it's been colored, right? So the minerals and the chemicals that are in those colorants for the glass mean you can no longer melt it down and reuse it. And so he said, this is a huge problem. How can we have half of this being waste? And so Matteo figured out a way to take that glass waste, melt it at a lower temperature so the environmental impact is actually less, turn it into a paste that then you can use in a 3D printer. So he is looking at the problem of, we've got all this waste. We want to continue this beautiful tradition of Murano glass. He and his wife want to continue to live in Venice. They want to raise their family there. So how can we make all these things work? And so he figured this out, and now he's got this company. He's partnering with huge names, and he's just posted again about a project that he's doing with L'Oreal, which we saw some of that in process when we were there. And he's figuring out a way not only to be more sustainable for this beautiful art form that is known around the world and has been known, for hundreds of years. He's figuring out how to bring it into the next century in a smart way, and in a way too that could either bring more jobs in or keep more jobs locally. And that's the focus for a lot of people that we spoke with, is making sure that there are other opportunities. Not that tourism is bad, right? But that there are other opportunities outside of the tourism sector for people who want to continue to live in Venice, who want to continue to be Venetians. And maybe that's not what they, not what they studied, not what their passion is, in a way that they can sustain their own life and their own community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people sometimes conflate environmental sustainability and they don't realise that it can also be economic sustainability as well. So the things aren't mutually exclusive. You can have both.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the magic happens, and it's a win-win for everyone.
You're right. It's often mutually beneficial. I think that's such a great point.
So I like a lot of the times when I go to Venice, I've been a little bit sad because people have seemed a little bit fatalistic, like there is nothing that they can do to save their city. But really loved the film because you managed to find these people which were so positive about their future and what they can do. And I think they're very realistic, but also they have ideas and they're not afraid to try. And I think one of my favourite people was Fabio Carrera, and it made me so happy to hear him talking about his very practical ideas for the city.
And he gets it, right? So Fabio has such a fascinating story. So as I told you, when I initially started doing the research for this project, Fabio was one of the first people I spoke with, and we ended up on a Zoom for an hour and a half. And, what drew me to him in the first place was 30 years ago, he started the Venice Project Center. So he also works at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts, in Worcester, Mass. So he splits his time between Worcester and Venice, and he also has a project in Santa Fe. And so with the Venice Project Center, what he's done over the last 30 years or so, right, is he has groups of students that come over and they study various aspects of what's happening in Venice. So there's nothing that he hasn't studied or his students haven't studied. So that's everything from the impact of the speed of boats and the wake on buildings, the number of boats, the housing crisis in Venice, which a number of other cities can relate to, jobs. I mean, you look at everything, and he's studied so much of it, and he has great ideas. He's actually brought in this phenomenal program, which unfortunately we didn't have time to get to in the documentary, but called DesignX at MIT, that they're partnering with. And that's actually how I found Matteo and Rehab, where they're, reworking this glass from Murano. And it's a small business incubator that he is helping with that project. Now they brought that project into Venice, into his center. And his focus is finding ways to bring the jobs into Venice so that people have a reason to stay and to invest in Venice, because there's plenty of knowledge and know-how and creativity and brilliant people there, but they need the jobs sort of in the lagoon to give them a reason to stay. And so that's really his focus. And it is the jobs. That is his focus. And I think he has some brilliant ideas.
Oh, I was absolutely blown away. And it's interesting because I'd studied Renaissance history when I was at high school. And when I was actually pregnant, I had twins and I was very much laid out at home. Couldn't go very far. But the barista at my local cafe, he would always bring me a coffee, and he was telling me that he'd stayed in Venice as a student. He was a fine arts student, and he'd stayed there for, I think it was maybe 3 months, helping to restore some churches. But I mean, these opportunities are out there for not just Venetians as well, but for other people around the world to learn from these people, because they have, such amazing talents and skills that they've honed over generations, and we can't lose them. Like, I think there's a goldsmith there I think it's the last generation.
The last gold beater.
Mm-hmm. Did you meet him? Or?
No, I didn't. So it's funny. We spoke to them, and there had been a number of stories done about them. But so he's the last gold beater in Venice, and there really wasn't anybody to take over that business. And it led to an interesting conversation, off camera, with other people, which comes back to, in some ways, this article that I read in Wired magazine almost 2 years ago now called "Let Venice Sink," which was based on this research paper where, people start to think about, okay, we're spending all this money trying to, sort of save Venice from the water and everything that's around it, and making the case with other things around the world. And at some point you just have to let it go and let Mother Nature take its course. And so I had an interesting conversation with some of the other folks in Venice, again, off camera. This wasn't in the documentary, but just about, it's really sad that that's the last gold beater and that nobody wants to take that over, this beautiful creative process. But then also with certain things, is there a time and a place? And do you have to sort of, maybe you mourn that, right? But then it's a natural progression. And so then which things, as you're watching cities evolve, and as you're watching a city like Venice decide what it does and does not want to fight for, like who becomes the last gold beater, and then who is propped up, right? And who stays. And I think that's the decision that they're facing on a number of levels right now.
Yeah, right. So that's an interesting point, because I think maybe we want to keep things frozen in time, but there is also a beauty about having things, cities and places evolve also. So
yeah, and the reality is it's always evolved, right? So even we were doing an interview in this home, and as we're setting up, I said, do you know when the house was built? And it was just, it's just, it was magical. But you're in this, this giant house, and this beautiful backyard, and, one of the old wells. So, anybody who's ever been to Venice, or when you do go, for your listeners who haven't been yet, you'll see these old stone wells all over the place. And they're just sort of a cool reminder of times gone by. And the woman whose home we were at said, I don't know exactly what year it was born, but it's on the map. There's a very famous map that was drawn, and I believe it's 1501. The name of the map begins with a B. It's escaping me at the moment. But she said, the house is on that map. And I thought, oh, wow, it's been here since then. And then she said, but it didn't look like this, or it's not what we have. She said, so, and we were in the backyard, and she pointed up at, there were 3 or 4 stories of windows. And she said, so now this is this apartment and this is that one. And so I thought to myself, well, even those houses change over time. The house is still here, but all of these things are changing. And then she started to point to other buildings. And so that building wasn't here at this time. That one was added around X date. This one was added around, a couple hundred years later. And so it reminds you too, that even though you want to preserve the old, a city is constantly changing and evolving. And that's how it endures.
Absolutely. So, Erica, if you had some pieces of advice for people that were going to Venice, how do you think they can enjoy the city? Not only just see the highlights, but how would you suggest that people go about exploring Venice and having some of the experiences that you had?
I think, one of the best things you can do, if you have the time, stay a little longer. Don't rush your time there. So stay for a night, stay for 2 nights if you can, even 3, because that gives you a time to really get out there and explore in the neighborhoods. Wandering through a neighborhood away from the more touristy areas, get your picture on Rialto Bridge if you need it. Visit San Marco, it's beautiful. But there are so many other areas. So I would say get out of the more touristy, Instagrammable spots, if you will, do a little exploring. Taking a Row Venice lesson to learn how to row in traditional Venetian style is great. Also, there's a beach in Venice. You can hop on a water taxi and go to the Lido Beach, which is gorgeous. And then when you go home and people say, what did you do in Venice? You could say, oh, I went to the beach. And they'll say, what are you talking about? You were in Venice. So I think that's a great thing to do. Also, it's lovely to take a boat tour. If you could do it at night, and there are a number of, all the boat companies would do that for you, it is extra special to see the city at night and to see the lights. It's just really beautiful from the water. So I'd recommend that as well. Definitely go to the local restaurants and try some of the neighborhoods that maybe you aren't as familiar with. So Castello is one, Cannaregio is great. There's also, if you can go to a football game, so there's a soccer team in Venice. You can take the water taxi there. There is a full stadium in Venice. It's in the southern part of the city where actually Fabio Carrera grew up and where he still has a home. I mean, that's a really cool thing to do in Venice that is probably not something that you would have thought of. And there are so many wonderful islands to check out. I would also love to make a plug for the beautiful Michaela Bortolozzi, who started a really special shop and project. She's an artisan called Relight Venice. And she loves to meet people and to talk to you. And sometimes she does workshops where you can make a candle in her shop. And she also works with a number of local artisans. So for example, I believe it's called a fricola, which is it's the wooden piece on a boat that you'll see on like a gondola, or if you take a Row Venice lesson, where you put the oar.
Oh.
And there's a gentleman who makes those, and then his leftover pieces of wood, Michaela gets those pieces of wood. She turns them into bases for her candles. It's just another example of how local Venetians are working together to sustain one another. And it gives you a good story of Venice to bring home and a little something special. She makes beautiful candles and jewelry and bookmarks, and she's just a bright light, one of many in that city. And so that's another great way to meet a local. I think if you meet a local, you will never go wrong.
Oh, I love that. Next time I go, I'm going to have to take a big suitcase. Last time I went to Venice, which is I don't know if you went to that winery.
I didn't get to go. I'm a little jealous again.
I recommend. And I was so excited that I bought a bottle, and it comes in this big wooden crate thing. Oh, I was going on the train. I don't know what I was thinking. Everyone here who listens to this podcast knows I say travel light. And I did not take my own advice, but I don't regret it. And I haven't drunk that wine yet. I'm saving it for special occasions.
Oh, one other thing, a spritz and chiquette. So chiquette are, little basically apps that you'll have with your spritz in the afternoon. Try different spritz. Aperol is lovely. Select is Venetian, is a Venetian liqueur that's used in a spritz. You could also do Cynar, which is made with artichokes, which is also from the Veneto region. So just a little way to branch out if you want with your spritz.
Oh, I'm very impressed, Erica. You are almost Venetian. This is fantastic. And before we wrap up, I really wanted to know, how hopeful are you for the future of Venice? Did it give you some hope?
I tend to be pretty glass half full. I do have hope. I think there is a large community in Venice that cares deeply about its city, and they don't want this to just become a shell of itself. They don't want it to be an amusement park. I think their biggest challenge, probably in many ways, is what most cities and towns around the world face, and it's making sure the political will is there. As they said to me a number of times, politics is a fickle business. I mean, we certainly know that here in the United States. And so sometimes it's not advantageous for a lawmaker to really get behind a project if they're not going to be in office when that project comes to fruition. And so that's one of the biggest hurdles that they face. But I am hopeful. I think that, as one of the folks in our documentary said, we can do this, but we have to be more than just 50,000. We have to stand together, and we all have to use our voices collectively. And I think there is the will to do that. And I think as citizens of the world and as smart tourists, we can also play our part. So I'm going to go with yes, Venice can be saved. But as we say in the documentary, it's the choice of will we choose to do so. I'm choosing yes. I'm all in.
I'm all into. And I think if everyone takes the time to watch the film, which is on CNN Max, and I'll share all the details with everyone when we wrap up the show, but I think it's a really important one to see. And Erica, sometimes it does take a woman to show this side of a city, I have to say, because there are a lot of celebrities going to Venice, cruising around on their, boats and having a fantastic time. And, that's great and showcasing the city. But I have to say, I really did appreciate the work that you did, because it shows the humanity behind the city, and it's so much more than just a photo opportunity. So thank you, Erica. I thought it was a brilliant piece, and I can't wait for everyone to see it.
Oh, thank you. I so appreciate the kind words and those observations. And it was absolutely a team effort. So we had an incredible team behind us putting this together. So I will share that with them, because I certainly couldn't do it alone.
Fantastic. Okay, grazie mille, Erica. Thank you for joining us.
Grazie mille, Katie. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. And ciao for now.
All right, I'll see you in Venice.
Okay, great.
Ciao.
Listeners, I do hope you enjoyed my chat with Erica as much as I did. I'm always so thrilled to meet people who have a passion for this city and have taken the time to go beyond the crowds on the Rialto Bridge and San Marco to discover the history and magic of a city like no other. There are countless shows of celebrities enjoying Italy and Venice in the most fabulous of ways, and good for them. It's not lost on me that I contribute to the hype around certain places quite significantly myself. But if you are curious and are looking to travel in a deep and meaningful way, and I know that you are, please do have a look at the film Saving Venice. It's available to stream now on Max if you're in North America, or it can also be enjoyed as a showcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you have time for a longer read and you're interested in the work local artisans and entrepreneurs are doing to protect the city of Venice for future generations, our friend Valeria Necchio, who has appeared on the show several times, has written a brilliant piece for Italy Segreta that we'll also link to in the show notes at untolditaly.com/278 for episode 278. Grazie mille. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you could take a moment to leave a quick rating or review. It helps us reach more Italy-loving travellers and share the stories like the one we shared today about magical Venice. That's all for today. Next week, we're going to be practicing our travel Italian. But until then, it's ciao for now. The Untold Italy podcast is an independent production. Podcast editing, audio production and website development by Mark Hatter, production assistance and content writing by the other Katy Clarke. Yes, there are two of us. For more information about Untold Italy, please visit untolditaly.com.